Okay, sounds good.
Welcome to Tarot for the Soulless Materialist, a podcast where we ask, how can we make our tarot readings more dialectical? With the corollary question of how do we feel good about the work that we do? I'm happy to welcome the Reverend Erik Arneson, who does a podcast called Arnemancy, and you can catch a few episodes that I did guesting on Arnemancy. And one of the things that I find most interesting about Erik's work is that he's combining an interest in tarot with the art of memory stuff from my Renaissance magic guys, and we're gonna have a chance to talk about that. But first of all, Erik, can you tell us what makes you feel good about the work that you do?
Well, I guess in an abstract sense, in the fact I like not having a boss, so that makes me feel good. Another thing that makes me feel good is when you give somebody a tarot reading and it helps them. There are times when I think sometimes it can be pretty abstract. Sometimes I might not even know that I'm helping them until I see the look on their face or hear their reaction, and that kind of makes me feel good about it. And then I guess there's another thing, maybe a little bit more esoteric and a little weirder, which is that there's something about tarot that connects me to something beyond the material, which I guess goes against the title of this podcast, but it just sort of feels like there's something in it that explores sort of the way randomness or non-randomness interacts with the universe and gives us sort of a picture of a level of interconnectedness of things. Does that make sense?
That absolutely does make sense. And, just because this podcast is entitled Tarot for the Soulless Materialist, and I'm trying to, provide a kind of medicine for that kind of a person, doesn't mean that I don't welcome other explanations. So let's talk a little bit about your show. So you do a show where you talk to people about esoteric topics. And you also offer tarot readings yourself. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, my show, I talk a lot. I talk to tarot people, but I also talk to a lot of occultists, historians of Western esotericism, mystics, and various, other weirdos like that. And it's been going on for about 2 years now. I'm actually just about to wrap up the second season and take the summer off. And it's been a really enlightening experience. I guess it's one of those things that I think you learn through teaching also, which is that you never really get a good handle on your material until you try to tell it to somebody else. But you also never really get a good handle on stuff unless you ask other people about it and you realize that, oh, there's just things I didn't know. So I guess a lot of times I look at my show, my podcast as kind of a learning experience, both for myself and for my audience, which I, of course, always notice when I'm editing it because I tend to stammer a lot and I'm sort of like, wait, hold on. What do I ask next? So that's that. And then tarot readings, we've, the pandemic has been going on, so I haven't done in-person tarot readings in over a year, but I used to do a lot of tarot readings sort of at events. Usually, actually for a while, I was doing a regular monthly event at a wine shop where I'd go in and do tarot readings. And when I say a while, I was doing that for like 5 years. I didn't realize that. But both the wine shop owner and I, when we hit the 5-year mark, we're kind of like, holy crap, that's many years. But then I also do tarot readings online, both by email and over Zoom chat, like video chat.
So I'm going to get on to questions about the art of memory stuff, but it seems like a good time now to ask, so you've done a lot of work as a tarot kind of worker. What are your thoughts on the working conditions for people who work with tarot and give readings professionally?
It is, oh boy, the working conditions. It is a difficult way to make a living. It's, first of all, it takes a lot of time to do a tarot reading. and a lot of energy to do a tarot reading. And people, it's very, very hard to like ask for enough money to actually make it worth your while. So you end up getting stuck in this situation where you either ask too little for your time, which ends up just wasting your time and making you kind of bitter and fed up with it, or you ask too much for your time, which actually I don't think is, it's rarely too much. When you ask enough for your time, you end up just not getting enough people asking for readings. Finding the sweet spot is really, really difficult, and then getting enough clients that it can actually be a viable job or a viable soul job is difficult, and I think super rare. I don't think I've ever met anybody who makes, well, okay, that's not true. I have met people who claim to make a living off of just doing tarot readings, but most of the tarot readers I know, I would say like 99%, it's sort of like a side gig. They combine it with other stuff. Even if it's in the realm of tarot, they also have to like write and sell books or do classes or do something of that nature. And then in addition, it's I guess that's kind of the tough thing. It's also it's a spiritual art. It's not really a science or anything of that nature. And that tends to really, I think that a lot of people feel like that gives them a license to kind of like look down on tarot reading or treat it like it's solely entertainment and not really real. Yeah, but it's really rewarding when it works, and it's really rewarding when you actually get to do it. And in fact, one of the things that I've discovered that I really love is doing email tarot readings, because I get a chance to kind of sit and work with things, and then I have this template to make this beautiful document that I send to people and all that kind of stuff. I really enjoy those.
So what about the tarot scene in your town?
Well, I'm in Portland, Oregon, which is a pretty weird city. And the tarot scene here is rich. Like it's huge. Just to give an example, in October of 2019, I went to an event called Tarot Talk at a local event space run by a shop called Sea Grape. And Tarot Talk was a panel of 4 tarot creators. And these were all people who were either creating tarot decks or in the process of creating one. They were not the only tarot deck creators there, but there was also a crowd of, I think, at least 30 people who were all involved with tarot or something around tarot. And it was rich. In fact, just the other day, I went to my first birthday party since the pandemic lockdowns started getting lifted, and everybody there was a tarot reader. So, and it's also the crowd tends to skew a little younger than I've seen in kind of like larger tarot events, and it's very inclusive. Maybe even, I don't know if I am using this word right, but maybe you could even consider it to be kind of intersectional. So there's tons and tons of tarot people here. They tend to be younger. There's a pretty big LGBTQ presence in the tarot community, and it seems like very open-minded and accepting and populous.
Now, what advice would you have for tarot creatives who are looking for opportunities to improve their game and their business?
Oh God. I don't know. I guess the advice I would have is they should come to me and give me advice. That's a tough one. Here's one thing that I think that I have learned is that if you really want to turn tarot into a business, you have to embrace marketing. You have to learn how to market yourself. And part of that involves sort of like creating, figuring out how to sell your persona or present yourself as a tarot reader. Part of that involves making sure that you've got a really good handle on the subject, but you also have to figure out like how to talk to people, like how to get the word out. And this is the thing that I find extremely tricky. You can't just sell yourself to other tarot readers. You have to find people who are not tarot readers and be like, hey, you need a tarot reading. And that's a weird secret. That's like one of those secrets of marketing that I don't necessarily have a super great handle on. But obviously, the people who manage to actually make a living as tarot readers, they've figured out something that I have not yet.
Can you tell us about a few of the episodes of your podcast that our listeners might be interested to hear?
Sure. I think maybe one that is that might be the most interesting is I have a episode called A Tarot Reading with Aaron Epperson, in which a friend of mine who is not an occultist or an esotericist or anything like my usual guests comes on, and I give him a tarot reading on the podcast episode. I think that might be useful for people who are trying to figure out, like, what does a tarot reading sound like? How can it, how does it work, and that sort of stuff. But I also have interviews with a number of tarot creators and tarot readers of various sorts. I have a great episode. Probably one of my favorite tarot interviews is an episode called 36 Secrets with T. Susan Chang, who's a fairly well-known tarot expert. I also have an episode called Tarot Beyond the Binaries with the Word Witch, in which I interview Charlie Claire Burgess, who's the creator of the Fifth Spirit Tarot. And then another of my favorites is my one and only live episode that was recorded at the Rose City Book Pub in front of a live audience with Coleman Stevenson of The Dark Exact. So, and there's others too. I think I've probably a good third of my podcast episodes have to do with tarot. So you just have to, if you go to the website, and they'll be easy to find. They're all in there.
So you mentioned, that one of the things you like about this work is that when you give a tarot reading, you're helping people. And I'm always surprised when I give a kind of esoteric unpacking of the weird symbolism or the relationships between the cards in a layout, and I give some suggestions for how that might impact somebody's life, and people just click with it. Very often people are just like, wow, that hits really close to home. How do you think that works? How would you explain the efficacy of a tarot reading?
Oh man, I'm going to try to do this without using the word archetype. Oh geez, hold on, my screen just locked. Okay, sorry. I think that's a really good question. I think that I think one of the reasons that it works is that tarot deals with a lot of symbols that all of us have sort of had in common and dealt with our entire life. Also, when you give a tarot reading, you're probably going to be talking to somebody who's not incredibly different than you. So it's easy to see how, the symbols or meanings in the cards can kind of like reflect on their life through your own experience. So even when you might feel like you're being really esoteric or really out there, you're probably using words that speak somehow to an experience that they have had. I think that there's probably something a little bit more unusual happening as well. I'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about the art of memory, but I think that tarot, or the symbolic language of tarot, enables us to use language in a way that sort of like opens up a more imaginal or like symbol-based communication mode that just sort of, I don't know, allows ideas to move more freely, or allows ideas to be impressed on another person. I think in addition, depending on how you look at tarot, I think that there's things in the tarot itself that can be used to explain sort of the entire progression of something from the beginning of an idea into its fullest material substance, from the most abstract to the most physical. And I think that having just sort of that cross section allows you to easily kind of like make connections with others, and helps you speak to where they might be in their life, or where they might be in a specific situation. tarot just has a very complete language, I think.
So let's get on to the art of memory stuff. And oh, and by the way, I neglected to mention this is episode 16, The Tower. And the Tower is a cool card. Before we get on to the art of memory, can you say a few things about what you like about the Tower card?
Oh, one of the things I like the most about the Tower card is it is just such a ridiculous disaster of a card. The Tower tends to represent kind of an initiatic experience involving a lot of destruction in your life, and not destruction as in like things are going to explode and burn down, but it represents like those points in your life where everything seems like it's lost. You might lose your job, or you get kicked out of a house, or you're physically injured, or something happens that just sort of upends your life. But of course life goes on, and these sorts of events, like these sorts of like big shocking events, even though they could represent super low points in our lives, the lessons that they give us, if we can learn from them, allow us to move into a new portion of our life with some sort of greater strength of character and more will, and the ability to handle more adversity. So the Tower is kind of an upset or an initiation that you don't see coming. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
So let's talk art of memory. This is a research interest that we both have in common, and I really feel like you can go back through the history of esotericism and look at stuff like the Sefer Yetzirah or the memory wheels of Raymond Lull, and then the use of the art of memory in Renaissance magic, that all feel like sort of precursors to the tarot. So can you talk a little bit about how your work and research has investigated the connections between art of memory and tarot?
Yeah, I would actually say I think that we might be able to find a few like really tenuous connections between tarot and the art of memory from like early modern times, or even like the Renaissance era. We have like the Mantegna tarot cards, which is a collection of like 50 images that represent a broad swath of concepts and life portions and deities and divinities and stuff like that, which are all categorized according to various methods. And those could be something like a deck of memory images, possibly, but I don't really believe that there's a solid connection between the art of memory and tarot. The art of memory itself sort of it was pretty much dead by the time tarot was adopted by the world of the occult. The occult stuff in tarot didn't start happening until the 18th century, and by then the art of memory had pretty much died out and been relegated to the dustbins of history. But when you look at how tarot ended up developing and how it ended up being used, you can see that the concepts of the tarot, this idea of images in sequence and images in kind of space, it meshes so well with the art of memory that I've combined them myself. I'm sure others have too. I'm sure that there are a lot of tarot readers and tarot users who have recreated mnemonic techniques based or very similar to European art of memory tricks, but they just don't know it. They just fit together so well that it makes sense. So I guess I've sort of tried to start formalizing this and approaching it in a way where I'm like, how can we approach tarot or the use of tarot from an art of memory first standpoint? And it's an ongoing process, but I have a really excellent system, I believe, for using all of the minor arcana of the tarot using the art of memory. And I'm working on and in fact I'm putting together some slides and stuff for this right now. I'm working on a way to utilize the art of memory to integrate with the major arcana. And a lot of times this can go both ways, right? So tarot tends to be used a lot by people who are, practicing magicians or practicing occultists. And you do frequently hear of people using tarot in like spell work or meditation work or things of that nature. Probably the example that comes to mind the most to me is T. Susan Chang. Like if you listen to her talk about the way she uses tarot, it is deeply integrated with her magical work. So the art of memory has pretty strong ties to Renaissance magic, and in particular, like Renaissance image magic. So one of the things that I have been playing with and experimenting with is how to integrate tarot or utilize tarot with modern image magic and modern imagery. And part of that, feel free to interrupt me at any time if this gets too confusing or weird, because it's not something that I always have the easiest time explaining to people, since it doesn't seem like very many people are doing this at the moment. But so part of that is kind of like reframing the way I look at how tarot works, and sort of approaching it through more of a like Renaissance mode of thought, I guess, if this fits at all. In the Renaissance, it was believed that we had some sort of weird organ or spiritual connection between like the body and the soul that was called something like a phantasmal apparatus. And it was like a translation thing that translated like the pure images and ideas and forms of the soul into language and back again. So it was the way that the soul was able to not only communicate with the body, but that bodies could communicate with other people. So I kind of look at the tarot as a thing where when I'm using tarot, there's two of them. First, there is the tarot that exists in my memory, the tarot that is the images that sort of are residing in my soul, where my soul has that kind of interface with the divine, or interface with like a higher version of me, or like the loftier portion of my soul. And then there's the physical tarot, the cards that I'm laying out in front of me. So I try to connect them. I try to have the images in my memory called up and used along with the physical cards. And through that, I sort of try to allow that I guess it sort of feels like when it's working right, when the images and the physical cards kind of align, it's almost like there's a window for intuition, if intuition is a real thing. But it feels like there's more insight. And it could be just, I suppose if we were going to look at it from a boring materialist point of view, maybe it's just that the images in my memory are very closely tied to the concepts of the card and allow me to kind of connect to them without having to worry about like language, for instance, getting in the way. But that's not really how I've been treating it. And it seems to work. I feel like it makes my readings better.
And how can one argue with that?
I don't. I'm sure there are ways.
I'm reminded of there's a great line. I probably read it in Robert Anton Wilson that if you were to be like locked up in jail and you had the tarot deck attributions memorized, that you could just use that to sort of like teach yourself the whole of occult science, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that I think gets into a stickier, weirder situation where we talk about what happened to the tarot in the Golden Dawn, but yeah, I think you could definitely, if you had all of the tarot attributions memorized, you could have quite a party in your mind.
What did happen to the tarot with the Golden Dawn? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's. I am a little irritated at the Golden Dawn. So in the late 19th century, the Golden Dawn sort of they were a magical lodge system that developed in like the 1880s, 1890s. But one of the things that they did is they adopted tarot. They weren't the first occultists to look at tarot, or the first ones to sort of like associate tarot with stuff like Kabbalah, but they were the ones who made the biggest jumbly mess of it. They used tarot and Kabbalah as a way to kind of like vacuum up, hoover up every religion they could come across, every occult system they could come across, every system of esotericism they could come across. And through it, they just made this big muddy mess of occult correspondences, some of which, it's internally consistent. It's just not always like externally consistent. It kind of reeks of, I guess to me, it always reeks of a sort of like almost occult colonialism, where they figured that their system was superior, and so every other system must correspond with it. They sort of, I guess, were the primary creators of the Hermetic Kabbalah, which is just a system of appropriating every religion you can find. So I guess in some sense, like, you could definitely, I guess, explore almost everything using the tarot. I'm not sure if you get a very accurate picture of everything doing it that way, but you definitely can use it to explore, for instance, Western esotericism itself, fairly comprehensively.
Yeah, the thought that strikes me here is, I'm not necessarily against that, what I call the mania for systematization, right? But once it becomes a totalizing system that subsumes the other, as you're saying, appropriating, right, and just kind of like trying to explain all of religion in terms of basically, Christian values. That's where we get into problems. And it's a similar problem with my guy Pico della Mirandola, right, who wanted to explain Kabbalah in terms of Christian values, and really use it as a tool for converting the Jews. So, and I think that that's a great segue to our final question, which is one of the main themes of the show. And I'd love to get your take here. And you can take this, as liberally as you want. How can we make our tarot readings more dialectical?
I guess I've got a question for you first. You asked me that in an email, and my first thought was, I don't even know how to understand how to answer this question until I figure out what Ted means by dialectical. So I went and I kind of read about it a little bit, and I thought about it a little bit. And it's hard to say. It's hard to say because I'm not sure that I totally know that tarot can be used to make things more dialectical. I'm not sure that tarot can be used to pursue things like real truth. It might be used, you might be able to use it to pursue like subjective truths, things that might help you understand yourself, things that might help you understand your place in the universe, or how you feel about your place in the universe. But will they be objective? Will they be actual truths? I don't know. I'm not sure how that could be used. I think tarot can do things like help you understand oppositional forces. The way that when I don't have an entire podcast episode to explain how I think tarot works, when I'm just like sitting down with somebody who's never had a reading before, a lot of times I tell them that the best way to look at tarot is that it gives you new perspectives to look at issues. It can kind of force you, some of the images, especially, the really strong images in the major arcana, or, some of the stabby images in the swords cards or something like that, can really kind of, jolt you out of like what you were expecting to think, and it can make you look at stuff from a different angle. So I guess maybe in that sense, that can help you be more dialectical. It can help you at least not be so set in your own ways that you think that there is only one answer, or that there's only one approach to like a problem or a question. And I think another thing, if you study tarot and you kind of look at the progression of tarot, I'm sorry, not like the historical progression, but like the progression of the cards and the symbolism of the cards. And in this, I usually look at the minor arcana for something like this, where you can look at things both horizontally and vertically, right? You can look at how the numbers progress, or you can look how the suits progress. And I think when you do this, you can gain a better understanding, or a healthier concept of how processes work, how things can move from, you know, an ideal to a plan, or how a plan can move from being a plan into actuality. And I think that this is something that gives you a metaphorical sense of sort of like I guess like emanationist philosophies, like maybe Neoplatonism or Kabbalah or something of that nature, where you can sort of see things moving in layers. You can see things moving in ways that may or may not be mechanical, but definitely aren't staying still. So how can we make our tarot readings themselves more dialectical? I don't know. I want to know from you, like, when you think dialectical, do you kind of think of it as something like a dialogue,
Yeah, I
or
mean, it's sort of about, we've got these oppositional forces, right, that are represented by all of these different symbols in the tarot that have these kind of binaries, right? Like swords
Mhm.
versus discs, and wands versus cups, right? They have these polarities to them, and we put these forces, we put these archetypes into a conversation in the same way that, dialectical thinking, like you were saying, it's not about sort of having the one truth, but it's about seeing how all of these, these different forces in the world have their own vectors, they have their own, kind of like meaning, values, and it's all kind of playing out against each other in conversation.
I do have, okay, here's a practice that I have for people out there who might have their tarot decks handy. Get get two minor arcana of the same number, or heck, get all four of them of the same number, and lay them out, and figure out like two keywords that they all have in common. Like if you look at all of the sevens, if you look at the 7 of cups, 7 of wands, 7 of swords, and 7 of pentacles, like what are the keywords that all of those have in common? And if you look at those, you find their similarities first. The differences stand out a little bit more, but they do help you see how possibly those opposing forces are all necessary for each other. You don't get to have that kind of conversation or that kind of relationship unless everything is all in the same system, which means that the system requires opposition. And you can do this also with the major arcana by looking at cards that are very similar, but seemingly not. And it'll be more difficult because in the major arcana, sometimes it'll seem like things are arranged in pairs, but sometimes they'll be arranged in triples, or they'll be arranged in quadruples or whatever. The major arcana is a little bit more confusing, but probably my favorite pair in the major arcana to look at is the Hanged Man and the Tower. If you look at those two, like, what do you see in them that is common and what is different? They both have people upside down who are not having the time of their lives. But I always look, so in my contemplation of those two cards together, I sort of look at them as kind of cousins, where the Hanged Man, for instance, is a card about going into some sort of initiatic upheaval or some sort of big change, but doing it with a plan or doing it on purpose. Whereas the Tower, the same thing happens, but it's unexpected and you're not prepared. You can see this, in cards like the Fool and the Magician pretty easily, but can you also see it in the Magician and the World? Or can you see it in the Sun and the Chariot? Like, where do the lines go? Is there always an opposition between two cards? Do they always work together? So I guess the best way to make your tarot readings more dialectical would be to look at pairs of cards, and if they seem like they are in opposition to each other, find out how they're not. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great, and I think you've really put the finger on the pulse of one of the things I like about dialectical thinking. And going back to what you were saying about helping, your querent, I think that we can really help people to discover the contradictions that we are tied up with, and ultimately, hopefully, to resolve, to unpack, or at least to sort of like map out the vectors of these kind of double binds that we find ourselves in this world.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So thanks a million, Reverend Erik, for coming on the show. Can you just remind our readers where they can find you on the internet?
I am so easy to find. I am at arnemancy.com, ARNEMANCY.com. I'm also Arnemancy on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Heck, maybe YouTube. I don't know. I'm sure I've got a couple of YouTube videos, but yeah, I'm available out there everywhere. I love talking to people. Feel free to hit me up and ask me questions about tarot or any sort of weird stuff.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and look forward to further conversations.
Well, thank you, Ted. This is a pleasure.
Have a good one.